Okay, so sound. It's everywhere, right? But how often do we actually, stop and think about it?
It really is one of those things we take for granted.
Totally. Like, a knock at the door tells us someone's there. A siren means something's up. I mean, imagine playing hide and seek without sound. Impossible.
You'd never find anyone. It's incredible how much we rely on sound to navigate the world around us.
Right. And you sent over this chapter from a science textbook that, well, it kind of blew my mind, breaks down the science of it all, and it's way more interesting than I ever realized.
Oh, absolutely. Sound is often overlooked, but it's incredibly complex and fascinating once you start digging into it.
Okay, so let's dig in. The textbook starts with the basics. How is sound even made? What's going on when, say, someone slams a door, or, like in our hide and seek example, someone steps on a creaky floorboard and gives themselves away?
Vibrations, basically.
Right.
That creaky floorboard, your vocal cords when you talk, a guitar string, they all produce sound through vibrations.
And the textbook has this cool experiment with a rubber band. You stretch it around a pencil box, slide some pencils underneath, and when you pluck it,
You can actually see the vibration and hear the sound it makes.
yeah, it's a great way to visualize something we can't always see happening, although the book mentions that even if you can't see the vibrations, you can often feel them. Ever put your hand on a speaker playing loud music?
Exactly. It's a physical phenomenon, not some kind of magic. Those are sound waves, and they need a medium to travel through, like air.
So it's like if you were in a total vacuum.
You wouldn't hear a thing.
Wait, seriously?
Seriously. Think about a vacuum cleaner. Part of how it works is by removing air. Well, sound can't travel in a vacuum because there are no air molecules for those vibrations to pass along.
That's wild. So that whole "can you hear me now" thing with cell phones, it's not just a marketing gimmick.
Nope, it's based on real science. Sound needs a medium to travel, whether it's air, water, or even solids.
Which reminds me the textbook talks about whales and dolphins communicating through sound underwater.
Right. Sound actually travels faster and farther in water because it's denser than air.
That's so cool. Okay, so we've got these vibrations traveling through the air and they reach our ears. But how does our body actually turn those vibrations into something we hear? Time for a journey inside the ear.
Let's get microscopic.
I love it. So the textbook describes the eardrum as being like a stretched rubber sheet.
Which makes sense because it needs to vibrate in order to pick up those sound waves.
Right, but then they have this visual of a tin can eardrum model. They sprinkle grains of salt on top, and when you speak into the open end.
The salt dances. It's a really cool way to demonstrate how those sound waves cause the eardrum to vibrate.
It's like a microscopic dance party happening in our ears all the time. But how does that dancing salt, so to speak, turn into actual sounds in our brains?
Okay, so it gets even more complex here. Those eardrum vibrations get passed along by tiny bones in your middle ear,
Hmm.
the hammer, anvil, and stirrup. And then they hit this spiral-shaped structure called the cochlea.
The cochlea, that's
Yeah.
in the inner ear, right?
Exactly. It's like this fluid-filled chamber lined with thousands of tiny hair cells. And get this, each hair cell is tuned to a different frequency.
Wait, so it's like having a bunch of tiny tuning forks in our ears.
Kind of. As those vibrations travel through the fluid in the cochlea, they stimulate the hair cells. Those hair cells then send signals to the brain, which interprets them as sound.
So our brains are basically conducting this incredible symphony of sound based on the signals from these tiny hair cells. It's amazing.
And incredibly delicate, which is why the textbook stresses how important it is to protect our ears from loud noises and never stick anything sharp in there.
No kidding. Damaging those delicate hair cells can lead to hearing loss. And that's not something you want to mess around with. Okay, so we've got these vibrations, they're hitting our eardrums, getting amplified, and triggering signals in our brains. But why do some sounds seem louder than others?
That comes down to amplitude.
Amplitude. So how big those waves are.
Exactly. The larger the sound wave, the greater its amplitude and the louder the sound.
So using the textbook's example, if you gently tap a metal tumbler versus whacking it hard.
The whack will create larger sound waves, which your ears will perceive as a much louder sound.
Makes sense. But what about the pitch of a sound? Like, why does a baby's cry sound so different from an adult's voice, even if they're both equally loud?
That's where frequency comes in. It's all about how fast those sound waves are vibrating. The faster they vibrate, the higher the frequency, and the higher the pitch we hear.
So, like, a hummingbird's wings beating super fast, that's a high-pitched buzz compared to, say, the slow thump of a bass drum, right?
Exactly. The hummingbird's wings are vibrating at a much higher frequency than the bass drum. And remember the cochlea we were talking about with all those tiny hair cells?
Yeah, like our inner ears symphony orchestra.
Right. Well, different parts of the cochlea respond to different frequencies. High-pitched sounds stimulate hair cells near the base, while low-pitched sounds activate those near the top. It's like each sound has its own designated spot on the cochlea.
That's wild. Okay, so we've got amplitude for loudness, frequency for pitch. It's like the secret code behind every sound we hear.
It really is. And speaking of secrets, the textbook mentions that there's a whole world of sound out there that we can't hear.
Wait, what? There are sounds our ears just miss.
Totally. Our ears can only detect a certain range of frequencies. Sounds below that range are called infrasound, and those above it are ultrasound. They're happening all around us, but we're completely oblivious.
So it's like a secret sonic world existing right alongside ours, and we have no idea.
Exactly. And sometimes we use technology to tap into that world. Like, those dog whistles that seem silent to us, but dogs go crazy for?
Yeah. So they're actually making a sound, just one we can't hear?
Right. It's at a frequency dogs can hear, but humans can't.
It's like a secret language only they're in on.
Exactly. And then there's ultrasound technology. It uses really high-frequency sound waves way beyond our hearing range to create images. It's used in medicine all the time.
Oh, right. Like when doctors use ultrasound to see a baby during pregnancy.
Exactly. It's pretty incredible how we've learned to use sound in ways we can't even perceive directly.
Mind-blowing. Okay, so we've covered how sound is made, how we hear it, all this amazing stuff. But the textbook also brings up this question of when sound becomes noise. What's the line between the two?
Ooh, good question. And it's not always a clear line. What sounds like noise to one person might be music to another.
Totally. Like some people love heavy metal and others find it totally jarring.
Exactly. A lot of it comes down to personal preference, cultural background, even just our mood at the time.
So the exact same sound could be perceived totally differently by different people.
Absolutely. And that's where noise pollution comes in. It's essentially any sound that's unwanted or disruptive enough to negatively impact our well-being.
So it's not just about how loud something is, but also the context and how it affects us.
Exactly. And the effects of noise pollution can be pretty serious.
So we're talking like sleep problems, getting stressed out easier. I've even heard that too much noise can actually damage your hearing over time.
It's all true. And it's not just those super loud, obvious things like, going to a concert without earplugs or being near a jackhammer.
Oh, yeah, good point. It's that constant everyday noise that can sneak up on us.
Exactly. Traffic, airplanes overhead, even just the hum of appliances in your house. It all adds up.
So what can we do about it? I mean, we can't exactly live in a soundproof bubble.
Well, some people might try, but you're right. It's about being more aware of our sonic environment and making choices to reduce noise where we can.
Like turning down the TV instead of blasting it.
Exactly. Or wearing headphones if you want to listen to music at work. Simple things like that can make a big difference.
Right, right. And if you're, say, designing a house or something, are there things you can do from a construction standpoint to minimize noise?
Absolutely. Using sound-absorbing materials in walls and ceilings, for example. And then there's urban planning. Creating more green spaces in cities can actually help absorb and diffuse sound.
Wow, I never thought of that. It's like fighting noise with nature.
Exactly. It's about being intentional and designing our environments with sound in mind.
This whole deep dive has been eye-opening, really. I mean, I knew sound was important, but I never realized just how much it impacts our lives in ways I never even considered.
It's easy to forget about it because it's such a constant presence. But sound shapes our experiences in profound ways, from our mood and stress levels to our ability to focus and even our social interactions.
It's true. Like, think about how different a conversation feels in a crowded, noisy restaurant versus somewhere quiet and peaceful.
Exactly. It affects everything. So I think the takeaway here is let's all pay a little more attention to the soundscape around us.
Right. Appreciate the good sounds, be mindful of the noise we create, and protect those amazing ears of ours.
This has been fantastic. Thanks so much for taking us on this sonic deep dive.
My pleasure. It's been fun exploring the world of sound with you.